Hey, what's up, guys? This is Super Mario Land from 1989, one of the launch titles for the original Game Boy, but not the pack-in title, because that, of course, was Tetris. Although Super Mario Land was developed under the expectation that it would probably become the bundle pack-in title for the original Game Boy. But then Nintendo, at some point, made the marketing decision that Tetris would be a better pack-in title because it would probably have a more widespread appeal to the broadest possible audience. And I do think that's true. I agree with that marketing decision. Because as much as I love this game right here, um, I can imagine it not. Well, I can imagine this game appealing to almost anybody and everybody. Um, but one crowd that I could imagine this not appealing to would be uh, elderly folks. Um, and Tetris on the Game Boy actually did find some big popularity with elderly folks at the time, and I think it was really the first game, Tetris. That is, I think it was the first game on the first console, the Game Boy, to really hit a huge popularity with the elderly crowd. Um, so, if only for that crowd, I could imagine that Tetris did have the more widespread appeal, if only for that one demographic. Um, it was a similar phenomenon to how many years later the Wii console would really find a huge popularity with the elderly crowd, uh, playing Wii Sports and Wii Bowling and whatever else. I think those were really the two consoles with the two games that really hit popularity with that demographic, the elderly crowd. And I don't think any other games or consoles really hit that mark um, in between in between those two games. Tetris on the Game Boy, and then years later, the Wii console with all of its sports games. I think those are really the two times that I know of that really hit popularity with video games for that specific demographic. Um, in fact, now that I'm describing it, there was a picture of, at the time, um, 89 or in the 90s, there was a picture of Hillary Clinton playing Tetris on an original Game Boy, I believe, uh, on an airplane, like sitting in her seat on the airplane. Um, so it's just kind of a funny example of that phenomenon I was describing of Tetris on the Game Boy really finding a newfound popularity for the elderly demographic that had never really been seen before. And I do think it was more elderly ladies more so than elderly men. So, and I think that was the same for the Wii console as well. I think both of these examples appealed to elderly ladies more than gentlemen. So yeah, there was that. And if you compare the two games, Super Mario Land with Tetris, in comparison, Mario Land would have the uh, smaller sprites on screen. I mean, the Game Boy was already such a small screen, such limited hardware in many different ways. So yeah, I could imagine some elderly ladies finding it difficult to see Mario's small sprite, for example, or some of the enemies, or some of the projectiles in this game, especially. I mean, some of the projectiles in this game are really quite small, just a few pixels. So I could imagine it being hard to see for some folks in that demographic, whereas Tetris, by comparison, has larger objects on screen compared to this. I mean that rubber ball that I just shot is pretty small, for example. Um, so yeah, that would be one reason that Tetris would be more appealing. Just better visibility with larger objects on screen compared to this game. Great song on this stage here. It's got that traditional Egyptian music theme. Really sounds very clear, very beautiful, I think. It's a short looping sample, but besides that, um, sounds great. All right. Oh no! I just missed jumping over him. Oh man. Now the controls are a bit awkward and quirky in this game, and I will be explaining that more as I play through it. So basically, this is the replacement of Bowser in this game, and you just want to run under him or jump over him. There's not a whole lot to say about this boss. Um, his behavior is a little more limited than Bowser was in NES Mario 1, which this is basically the replacement of. Which this Sphinx is basically replacing Bowser from that game. So a little more limited in its behavior here because Bowser would have started backing up if you went past him like that. We've got this sentimental sounding music here for a moment, but then then it changes when she turns into a monster. 1 second, I need to drink some more coffee. Oh man. Love the stage. Love that flying saucer that Mario seemed to have just come out of for no particular reason. And the stage design here just has a really open, free feeling. So it just feels wonderful after that rather claustrophobic last stage in boss battle. In fact, this main stage here, not this right here, not this coin room, but the the overworld stage has my favorite song in the whole title, right here. Trying to let the music be heard for a second there. Um, Best song in the title. A lot of people believe that this song is directly based on the Beatles classic Penny Lane, and I do believe that. Um, Even if it wasn't directly based on that song, it still sounds like it is. It still sounds very similar, um, and basically just sounds like a simplified remix of Penny Lane. So I really love this song and this world. The song only appears in this world here, so got to enjoy it while it lasts. Also, the waves animating is a nice touch. Just everything, all the aesthetics here just have a very open, free feeling about them. Just a lot of open space in this world. Um, Love the flying saucer. Yeah, just the animating waves. Even though it's a simple animation, I think it's only 2 frames. Oh no! That's one thing to point out, that it's really, really easy. It's ridiculously easy just to run off of platforms in this game. Um, so that's one thing to look out for. You basically want to avoid the edges of platforms whenever you can. Um, it's just unbelievably easy just to unintentionally walk off and fall directly into a pit. So it's actually the main theme of the gameplay here. The main theme of the gameplay is to avoid tricky situations in this game. And it's the only Mario game um, that has that focus in its gameplay. Um, oh no, that's something else to point out. Don't jump on enemies off center. You want to try to jump dead center on enemies whenever possible. Oh no, I just tried running and jumping, and that just kind of shows avoid edges. All right, I'm gonna get this star here. Now I don't enjoy the music here for invincibility, but I've read it's called the Can Can song, which is some kind of traditional song and dance that I don't really know exactly where it's from. Like I think it's some kind of traditional cultural song and dance, but I'm not really sure where it's from. I just recognize it from old cartoons, basically. Oh no. So yeah, that invincibility music is a strange choice for this game and for the series. There's a lot of unique content in this one game that just completely stands out from the rest of the Mario series. I do need to explain the timeline of Mario games that this was released into. Um, in other words, I need to explain the larger context of the Mario series at the time, which was completely different. The timeline of releases was completely different um, in the US and in the West compared to in Japan. So I don't want to actually go finish the stage quite yet. Because, like I said, this is my favorite song of the entire game. And, well, this is it. I guess I can't really say much more about it. But it's the last glimpse of the most beautiful song in the game. Just gives it a very cheerful, happy feeling. I think the soundtrack really carries this title. One of the biggest parts of the title that really just makes the whole gameplay experience really work. Um, and even though the first world, oh man, even though the first world has the music that's probably the most iconic and the most associated with this game, um, yeah, despite that, World 2 just had the most beautiful music. Um, but also, this particular stage also has a great song. This is a remix of music from NES Mario 1. So, very well done. Very fun remix of the classic music. Um, Now, Mario's sprite in this game is definitely directly based on his sprites in NES Mario 1. Um, and I was saying how there's a lot of unique content in this game, a lot of all new content. And there is. Oh no! Stuck for a second there. Um, but I think about half of the content, or maybe about a third of the content, is really based on traditional stuff from the main series. Oh, look at the coins right here. Spelling something out. I won't tell you what it is. um, so yeah, if half to maybe 2/3 of the content is all new, um, there's still more traditional content than it looks like at first, because most of the traditional stuff still looks different for this game. But I'll explain that more as I go through it. Here, I just want to point out this is a very strange boss for the Mario series. It's one of these things that was just never seen before or since in the Mario series. And when you shoot it, it has a very strange, disturbing reaction. It screams in agony and pain. So it's not a difficult boss. It might look like it is, but it's not too challenging. Just wanted to explain how weird that boss is and point out its painful screaming. um, Now this sentimental music here actually kicks off the final song of the game when you beat the game. Instead of changing into this riff right here, instead of that, the sentimental segment will go into a beautiful song that plays for the credits sequence. Um, and that song is actually just one of the best compilations of music ever heard on the Game Boy. So here the music is back to the same song from the first world, um, and that's fine. This is cheerful music. I don't really care for the coin room music here. It's just kind of very very simple low tones. um, and I suspect that the coin room music was made that way to be funny on purpose, like a funny contrast to all the great music that's in most of the rest of the game. But either way, that coin room music does emphasize how awesome the rest of the soundtrack is. But anyways, let me finish explaining how maybe a half of the content or maybe a third of it is traditional, but mostly looks different. So Mario's sprites are traditional, and they're really obvious from they're really obviously based on the sprites from NES Mario 1. But then there's stuff like the turtles, the Koopa Troopas that are traditional, but they look different and behave differently. Um, However, if you look in the sky, those clouds look like they're directly based on the clouds from NES Mario 1. So there is stuff like that. There's stuff like that that's almost directly ripped from the game. Um, but most of the traditional stuff is changed up, like the turtles. Um, and even the most directly ripped stuff is still more simplified, like Mario's sprites. Oh man, I can't believe I just missed that. Um, like as recognizable as Mario is in this game, his sprites are more simplified compared to NES. But still, they did a great job of recreating those same sprites with larger pixels, basically. Um, and I find that just psychologically, the fact of Mario's sprites being the obvious ones from NES Mario 1, I find that it gives the whole game a feeling of uh, familiarity from NES Mario 1, even though mostly everything really is changed uh, from that game compared to that game. Oh man, I didn't think you could actually jump through that little hole right there. I kept trying to do that in other times I was playing, and I could never get through it. I guess you just have to go underneath it and jump straight up. That's bizarre. Oh, here it is. You can't really do it right there. Okay. Yeah, the controls are just a little bit limited and quirky and glitchy, and so is just everything in this game. Just everything is just slightly more limited and quirky and slightly different compared to what we're used to. And then stuff like these rocks here are just all new content altogether. Um, so that's cool. I appreciate the all new content, um, as well as the traditional content. Um, the game is definitely a product of its time, and it's definitely due to all of the unique factors that were at play at the time of its development. Um, and that's why that's why a game like this will never be made ever again, because it was completely based on the specific factors of that time. Yes. All right. So one reason that there's so much unique content in this game is because this was the first Mario game to be developed without the direct involvement of Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto. And the reason for that is because he was working on games for the Super Nintendo at the time, uh, such as Super Mario World and Zelda Link to the Past. So that's why he was not involved directly in this game. Um, Although he already had been directly involved in all the previous Mario games. And actually, let me recap the series for the different regions of the time. Okay, so avoid those ledges, edges of ledges. Avoid the edges of ledges. um, so yeah, the timeline of the series that this game was released in. Um, for Americans, this was the third game we had seen in the Mario series. We had NES Mario 1, of course, which came with our NES console itself. So pretty much everybody had Mario 1. Everyone had the NES cart that had Duck Hunt and Mario 1 on it. So that was just a given that everybody had an NES with Duck Hunt and Mario 1. Oh no! It just went without saying that kids in the late '80s and early '90s all had an NES with with Duck Hunt and Mario 1 as the pack-in cart. It was just the expectation of other kids. Ah, so so yeah, we had that game, of course. Then we had American Mario 2. Um, and then this game was the third Mario game we had seen. Um, but the crazy part is that in Japan they had a completely different timeline. Oh man, you can't rush in this game. You can't run too fast. Um, the game really forces you to take your time and play slowly and carefully. So in Japan, this was their fourth Mario game that they had seen. Um, but they also didn't have the same Mario 2 as we did, and that's well known by now. Um, but just to quickly recap it, in Japan they had the same Mario 1, then they had um, ah, then they had Japanese Mario 2, which we never saw in the West until much later. It was re-released on Super Nintendo for us years later, but at the time, we had just never gotten Japanese Mario 2 in any form, um, and we never knew about it either. So they had Mario 1, Japanese Mario 2. They did not have American Mario 2, um, but they did have the original game that American Mario 2 was actually built on. So they had they had Doki Doki Panic without ever associating it with the Mario series, even though it was the fundamental same game as what we had as Western Mario 2. So, oh no. So they had the fundamental game without being part of the Mario series. So they had it in a way, but not in the same way that we got it. Um, so for them, they just had, as far as the official series, they had Mario 1, Japanese Mario 2, which we now commonly call the Lost Levels. Um, and they already had Mario 3 at this point. So that was one of the hugest differences for their region compared to us. Um, Mario 3 came out for them 2 years earlier than it did for us. So it really was a totally different context for this game to be released in. Um, yeah, they had, you know, those 3 games, and then this was the 4th game for them, and then we only had, well, I don't want to keep saying the same timeline, but it's just wild what a different series timeline we had. um, Also, later on in this game, there's a little bit of level design which seems to be based on Mario 3, which is pretty wild, but which does make sense when you take into account that Mario 3 was already out in Japan just 2 years before it was for us. And it was out before this game, which it definitely was not for us. But yeah, it's pretty strange to see um, apparently level design from Mario 3, which would have been the first time in America that we were seeing such Mario 3 content, uh, but not in the actual game, because that wouldn't be out for us until the following year. So strange how that all worked out. So yeah, you want to jump directly on the center. Oh god, you want to jump on center of things when you can. Oh my god. You want to avoid edges of platforms whenever possible. Um, if you jump on an enemy off center, you're very likely to be hit, even if you hit that enemy too. It's really easy to jump, to jump at a platform and then that was so lucky right there. It's really easy for your foot to sort of go right through the edge of a platform. I'm trying to show that right there. Um, I'm showing it right there. Like your foot can overlap a platform, but not catch on the platform. So that's definitely not what we're used to um, on NES at the time, or in any Mario games of the series. Um, so yeah, a lot of the unique content comes from Miyamoto not being involved. So developers were uh, coming up with their own ideas of what to throw in instead of Miyamoto planning it out more for them. Um, so that's why we get stuff like these boulders or like the strange themes of the different worlds. This one being themed on Easter Island. You can see an Easter Island head in the background there. Um, just all the unique stuff comes from developers coming up with their own ideas, basically, instead of Miyamoto uh, planning things out. Um, this boss you can't jump on, so you have to either just take a hit by going through him, or you can try to go above and avoid getting hit, but I don't think I've really managed to do that yet. Actually, no, I think I did one time by jumping on the boulders, and I managed to avoid him that way, but it doesn't really matter if you take one hit of damage when you get through it. All right, I'm going to get a sip of coffee. 1 second. All right. Got to readjust in my chair here. Ah. Nice. I got it without even knowing it was this coin room. This one you have to hold right when you're falling down, or else you can't get those coins in there. Um, the other way to do it is sometimes if you have that rubber ball power up, uh, that actually will collect coins for you. When the ball is bouncing around the screen, it actually will collect coins that it hits. Um, and that rubber ball power up, you might have thought it was a fireball, but it's not. It does come from a flower that looks like a fire flower, but in this game, it is definitely not a fireball. Oh man, it's definitely a rubber ball. Oh god, I was just trying to test that pipe if I could go down it. And there I did not do that. Did not hold right as I needed to. But yeah, the rubber ball power up is an example of the developers throwing in their new ideas. And like I said, part of the reason for that is because Miyamoto was not involved, so it was up to other people to come up with ideas for the game. So that's partly why there's so much totally unique content in this game. But another reason is because the game was going to have so many limitations just automatically, such as being in black and white, of course, having a low resolution, um, giant pixels, basically, much more of a limited resolution and display compared to the NES that everybody was used to, um, and so on and so forth. Just knowing that there would be so many limitations automatically part of the game. I think developers were looking to throw in new ideas that would not be taxing on the hardware. Such as the rubber ball power up. Like that was something new that they could do without straining the hardware at all. So it was kind of a way of embracing the limitations that were going to be inherent in this game, the game design, and that's partly due to the limited capabilities of the Game Boy, but it's probably more so due to the fact that this was the first larger game really developed for the Game Boy. So developers were unfamiliar with the console and how to get the most out of it at the time. So that's really probably more why this game is so limited, more the lack of familiarity of the developers with the console, more than the console itself actually limiting the game as much as it is. Um, the backgrounds kind of go with that same theme of emphasizing new content that would not be straining on the hardware. Um, So this is the only Mario game with line art backgrounds, and I appreciate that. I enjoy the line art backgrounds because it reminds me of somebody just sketching drawings on a piece of paper. So like this background here has, line art of bamboo stalks. It just looks like somebody doodled that, on a piece of paper. Possibly a student doodling on their schoolwork, for example. Um, so, so yeah, they were just finding finding things to emphasize that would not be demanding on the limited console. Although the later Mario games did show that the Game Boy was capable of much more advanced graphics and tighter gameplay than this. This was still the first big game developed for the Game Boy, so um, that lack of familiarity is probably the biggest reason that this game um, came out with so many limitations in it. I mean, like for example, those turtles that normally in the main series you could jump on them and then kick the shell to slide across the screen as a weapon. And that's an example of something that the Game Boy, I'm sure it must have been able to do that, and I'm sure it must happen in the later Mario games. I just haven't played the later Mario games on NES, but I assume that they have that mechanic working, um, as well as better physics and controls and everything else. Oh, I didn't even know that was there. Nice. Um, but I think the lack of the turtle shells being able to be kicked across the screen, I think that's an example of the developers not knowing how to implement something that was a little more demanding at the time. So they were playing it safe with what they were attempting to run in this game here. The gameplay elements that they were attempting, they kept it pretty simple. Um, and like I said, the later games really showed how much more the Game Boy was capable of. Oh man, that was weird. A lot of things overlap like that in this game every once in a while. A lot of sprites overlapping in strange ways. Everything was kind of rudimentary in this game. Kind of rough around the edges, kind of making it up for the console for the first time. Look at the blocks I'm standing on. Those are reminiscent of Mario 3. So this is the stage that seems to be referencing the game design of Mario 3, strangely enough. A full year before we would have seen it on the NES in the US. Oh man, and there is the lesson of not jumping off center on an enemy. Ah, like imagine how weird it would be if you had this game, if you had this game in '89 and you saw this one oddball world here, and then the following year when Mario 3 came out, imagine how weird it would be to recognize the level design in Mario 3 because of this game. Also, the coin rooms in this game are far more bizarre, like this right here, than they are in the main series. So that's another example of the developers focusing on emphasizing parts of the game that they could sort of add to more than the main series, but without taxing the limited capabilities and limited development skills that they were working with at the time. And I do like that rubber ball replacement of the fireball. Oh man. It's definitely a way to change the gameplay without adding anything that was more demanding. Ah, now in the main series, those piranha plants normally don't come out if you're standing next to the pipe. But in this game, it's kind of funny. They do come out sometimes if you're standing next to the pipe. Other times they won't. It just seems to depend on the stage, possibly, or maybe it's randomness. I don't know. Also, a quirk of the graphics that you could see just now when that bullet bill was flying by. The sprites really just overlap each other, and you can see through them in a way. I should try to pause it when that thing's going by. Like you can see. Oh, I'm not showing it, but you can see like the pipe being seen through the sprite of Bullet Bill right there. For example, you can see through the empty spaces in these sprites. Ah, the weird controls got me right there. And you want to focus on getting as many coins and as many lives as possible in this game. That's normally not what I focus on when I'm playing a Mario game. Uh, but here, that's really the only way. Um, because there are so many deaths from the controls being off. Now here is more level design from Mario 3, and if you don't recognize it, this is what you see in the castles of Mario 3. You see those orbs flying in a circle around a block, exactly like that. I mean, not exactly, but very similar. Oh my god. Ah! Gotta really focus and not rush through this. That was definitely helpful right there. By the way, this is the second to last stage in the game. Another extra life, that's sweet. So you definitely want to get as many lives as possible. There are also continues in this game that I'm not sure how exactly you get them. Um, but if you get all the coin rooms and all the coins and all the power-ups as you can, um, somehow you end up getting more continues as well. I'm not sure if it's just a matter of adding up overall points or you know, maybe something different. But yeah, if you're focusing on collecting as much as possible, you will get more continues too. Ah! Did you see my foot go right through that platform right there? Also, let me point out that the team that did develop this game um, was the same team that developed the Game Boy console itself. So uh, that decision made sense in a way for them to develop the first really big game for the console. And when I say the first big game, I mean in terms of being a larger game uh, for its content. Um, Tetris would be the most widespread game because it was the pack-in, but it wasn't a very involved game. I mean, Tetris is quite a simple game with not much content, even though it has, you know, endless replayability. I do like Tetris, but I mean, in terms of content, it's not a lot to it. Um, and this game only has 12 stages altogether, so altogether it's still a pretty small game. I mean, the Mario games had many more stages at the time on NES. Oh, look at the sky right here. It's the only time you see stars like that and clouds like that. I like that part. Um, so this is the very last stage of the game, and I'll be fighting the final boss very soon. This song, I think, is another remix of that traditional music from Mario 1 again on NES. So another nice song. And I like this boss right here. It's a cloud shooting birds at you. I think it's a very cute, very funny boss, but then it does change form into the very final boss of the game. Ominous music. The final boss, oh no! So, this might look complicated or it might not, because there's really not much to this. It probably looks more complicated than it really is. You just need to keep moving up and down to dodge his projectiles, and that's it. And Mario needs to select, which I haven't actually seen. I've only played through the game once like this right here. So I'm not really sure what that looks like exactly when you play through the game a second time. There's those clouds from NES Mario 1 again, looking quite recognizable, a little more simplified, but and the colors are tweaked a little bit, but they're still very clearly recognizable as ripped from NES Mario 1. So stuff like the clouds and Mario's sprites, like I was saying earlier, give it that familiar feeling from that game on NES. Even though most of the traditional elements do look different and behave differently, like the turtles and everything else. Like, this is definitely the only game in Mario's series to have turtles that explode when you jump on them, for example. um, and I think that was just a way to avoid having to try to program the shells to kick across the screen, being demanding on the game engine at the time. I assume that's why they didn't do that. But then they added the bomb explosion just to add something new in that would not be demanding. So it was a great approach of the development team. Embracing the limitations of the game engine for this first big game developed for the console. Um, they were embracing the limitations that were just going to be there automatically part of the game, but then throwing in new stuff that would not be taxing on the console. So I love that broad approach. Now here I do have to just press start, and there's and there's my there's that. So I do have to press start. There's nothing else that'll happen. All right, and I don't actually see any indication that there's a second quest, but people say there is, and let's check it out. This is apparently the second quest with more enemies. I just don't see the difference yet. But let's see what's up. So this is probably the most famously associated music with the title. As I was saying a while ago, just very cheerful, happy music, and anybody who picked up the title would have seen this stage and heard this music. But then World 2 having the best song in the game, it's kind of an incentive to, you know, to give it some time to get good at the game, enough to get to the second world and hear that, you know, that feature soundtrack for the second world. It's kind of an incentive to get good enough to get there and enjoy it. Ah! I felt like I got stuck in place for a second there. Yeah, just, you never know exactly how things are going to work in this game. Like, nothing is quite predictable or quite the same as what you remember from NES. Ah, I was hoping you wouldn't come and get me in there. Now, the original Game Boy had 4 shades of gray, basically, on the green reflective LCD screen. So the colors here are approximate in the emulator here. It's just not possible to make it look exactly the same as on the original hardware. I was trying to get a different emulator, actually. I was trying to get it downloaded and running, which would actually... One second, I'm rearranging on my chair. There is an emulator out there that really recreates the look of the original Game Boy, so much that it almost looks... It looks like the emulator is showing a video of a real Game Boy. I mean, that's how realistic it looks. It's got the green hue to the LCD screen. It's got the physical border of the Game Boy itself, plastic handheld console itself surrounding the screen of gameplay. So unfortunately, my Mac just did not want to run that emulator. And I find that that's what seems to happen with my Mac. I've got the 2017 iMac, which I love, but things like emulation have been a bit disappointing because it seems like what I said, that it just won't want to do a lot of things like that. Like, for example, one of the most common emulators is called Fusion. but my Mac doesn't want to play Fusion, so I'm using a different emulator, which is fine. I mean, I'm glad that there's one that I found that works on all different consoles, but but it won't run the most commonly used emulator, Fusion, and it also won't run the really impressive one that I was describing that made it look like a physical Game Boy was being used. Um, so I'm doing the best approximation of the black and white that I can, um, because the emulator is actually not playing the game in black and white for me. Um, my emulator would only play Super Mario Land in the color enhanced version, which I guess must be from the Game Boy Color. Um, so I think it's the same. I think the game ROM is exactly the same, but I think that the emulator is just adding a few colors to make it that Game Boy Color mode of gameplay. Um, but unfortunately, it wouldn't stop doing that. Like, I didn't see any settings to change or to make it just not add those extra colors in. So, so what I'm actually playing here is I'm playing the Game Boy Color enhanced. Oh no! The block killed me, even though it didn't move. Yeah, so this is actually. Oh my god. So this is the game being played in the color enhanced mode, but I've got my entire iMac display in grayscale. So that's how I'm doing this here. So it's not going to be, you know, exactly the perfect 4 shades of gray. Oh man, that was lucky. But yeah, it's just not going to be a perfect replication of the Game Boy's display. Um, Beyond the fact of it not being a green background, there were some models of Game Boys that came out later without the greenness, it turns out. So the black and white look would be accurate to some of the later Game Boy models, um, but yeah, even then, I don't think the 4 shades of gray here are really completely accurate. Because, like I said, this is actually playing the game with colors added, but then my whole iMac display is just in grayscale. So I'm guessing we're probably getting an extra couple shades of gray here. um, I mean, because we're turning a couple of extra colors or a few extra colors into gray, so we're probably getting a few extra shades of gray here. Um, so instead of 4 shades of gray, maybe there's like more than that. So yeah, unfortunately, it's just an approximation of the black and white display. But that's the best I can do right now. And yeah, if my Mac would have been more cooperative, I definitely would have gotten the most authentic possible green monochrome display possible. But still, I mean, we've got a pretty good approximation of the monochrome black and white display, even if it does have an extra couple or an extra couple or few shades of gray, which it probably does, as per the display settings that I was just explaining. Yeah, such a weird predicament to be in, though. Like, playing a Game Boy game that won't play in its original form because the emulator wants to give it extra colors for its Game Boy Color version, enhanced version, and the Mac won't play a different emulator. So, oh well. This still has a pretty nice look about it. Has a nice clear look to the graphics here. More clear than it would appear on an actual Game Boy. So this is kind of an extra clear, sort of an extra clear version of the original Game Boy display. Plus, it was just such a small screen on the Game Boy. It was such a small screen. It was diagonally, it was measured 2.6 inches, but then just measuring it up and down, it was probably about 2 inches, horizontally and vertically. It was about a 2-inch screen. So that made everything a little bit hard to see, and then there was a slight blurriness on top of that, especially with movement. There'd be some blurriness following sprite movements and stuff like that. So so for reasons like that, for reasons like the screen size and the blurring effects, this is a much more clear, much more visible version of the game. Although I still really want to get that one emulator working at some point, so I can make it look like it's a physical Game Boy with a green screen and everything. Penny Lane, I love it. I just love the feel of the stage. I mean, I guess it's largely in the imagination of the player, but I just love the open feeling of the stage with the waves splashing. Reminds me of visiting the ocean for the first time that I saw it on the West Coast. I went to California with a couple friends some years ago, and it was the only time in my life being out there and seeing the Pacific Ocean. And even though I've seen the East Coast a lot, like I've been to Florida a lot, I've been to other states along the coast, along the East Coast. But the West Coast ocean along the beaches there is really much more wild. Like the ocean is much more wild on the West Coast. There's more waves, huger waves, more wind. Just everything is more dramatic in the beaches on the West Coast. Even the plant life that you see on the beaches seems like much bigger and crazier on the West Coast. Like I remember just being amazed that there was like all these giant pieces of seaweed that were like washed ashore. Just stuff you don't see over here on our beaches. Like there were just giant stalks of seaweed, I remember like really hard stalks of seaweed that were like pipes almost, like resembling PVC pipe almost. Just I guess the plant life grows stronger and bigger out there with more strong ocean currents and wind currents and everything else. But yeah, just a lot more wind and a lot crazier waves. Um, so this stage reminds me of that, even though I do know that's mostly in my imagination that it reminds me of that. So when I'm playing through this world, um, in the previous main stages of this world, running and jumping around outside with the waves splashing and the Beatles song playing, it just really reminds me of seeing the Pacific Ocean for the first time and just being amazed at how wild the waves were and the wind, and the seaweed washing ashore, just everything just being so alien and so much crazier than the beaches on the East Coast. So it reminds me of that. I'm drinking coffee. 1 second. Now, in those bonus rounds, it's easy. It's doable to get Mario on the level that I want, um, but those ladders will sometimes still get me to go to the wrong level, like it just did. The ladders are pretty hard to account for in the bonus rounds because the ladders are flashing over everything much faster than Mario is. So the ladders give it some randomness in the bonus rounds. And I gotta say, for a second quest, I don't really see it. um, if there are more enemies, I'm just not really sensing it yet. Um, it's probably because, like I was saying earlier, the gameplay focus here is really on careful gameplay more than the main series. Um, but that is the main feeling of the gameplay for me. Is just trying to play really carefully, jumping straight on top of enemies, etc. Um, avoiding edges, etc. Um, so maybe that's why it doesn't really feel different to me, because I'm just playing with the same kind of emphasis either way. But yeah, I don't see more enemies. Like, it's not obvious if it's true. It almost makes me wonder if that's not true. Like, the whole idea of there being a second quest with more enemies, I wonder if it's ah, wonder if it's a false idea, because I sure don't see it. I mean, but it also wouldn't be that noticeable if it's only like maybe one or two more enemies here and there. Then it wouldn't be that obvious. So it's possible. Ah. That mushroom kind of falls in a strange trajectory straight down, just like Mario sort of falls off of edges really easily and really heavy. He just drops straight down like that, like real fast and heavy. That enemy just went through the wall, which doesn't make any sense. Ah, not sure if this song is based on anything, but it does have that cheerful feeling about it. And like I said, I do think the soundtrack really carries this game. One of the I think the music is one of the main elements that really carries this game and really makes it work. Um, because no matter what, you can enjoy the soundtrack here. even if you were no good at the actual game. I meant to jump there, obviously. See, even that was like too tricky of a situation that I should have avoided it. Like, don't get too close to the one spot if you're trying to jump to the other spot. So just got to avoid the tricky spots in this game. Oh man. I could have gotten those coins, but then you run the risk of like accidentally running and falling off the platform. Man, now I can't get up there. I think the music actually has like a loving feel to it, doesn't it? It's got it's like so cheerful and upbeat that it even sounds kind of loving. I don't know. Hard to describe, I guess. Then, like I said before, this song has quite the great, clear sound. Um, Even though it's such a limited. Oh man, see, trying to jump too tricky right there. Trying to jump in too tricky of a situation. Um, uh, but yeah, a really clear sounding song for the stage. Even though it's a short looping song segment, um, it sounds really clear, really recognizable as traditional, recognizable as a reference to traditional Egyptian music. So, like, if you were watching TV and this song came on, if you were like watching a documentary on Egypt and this song came on for a moment, you would never even think twice about it. Like, it sounds like real music that you would hear, possibly in a TV documentary. It sounds like real life music as opposed to video game music, even though it's a real short looping sample. So I mean, if you heard it on TV for like a few seconds, it would sound natural. Oh my god. I think it's kind of funny that they threw in those insects as enemies in the game, because it's just kind of choosing a really generic enemy that could be found in really any other game. Um, sort of an enemy choice that you can't go wrong because having insects as enemies would fit for practically any game. It's generic, but it fits here as well as any game. So I think it's kind of funny in that sense that it was sort of a sort of an enemy that was guaranteed to work in any setting. Like, you can't go wrong basically with having spiders and stuff as the enemies. Like, they can't not fit in a game. Ah, phew. Phew! Those platforms are super difficult to jump on without them falling and making you fall right away. All right. God, how do people know if there are more enemies in this second quest? It's not at all noticeable. Trying to time this out here. Ah! All right. I meant to jump on him right there. Wow, that was lucky. I doubt there's anything in that last box up there. Plus, I can't get it. Oh, man. Oh. Kind of run out of stuff to say about the game, but I'm just pushing through here. I still don't see why there's more enemies, or why this is a second quest. So I'm slightly unconvinced that this really is a second quest with more enemies. Um, However, it will be something new if I beat the game for the second time in a row and there really is a level select that appears. That'll be something new for me to see that I haven't seen before. Oh no! I was trying to jump on the other rock right there. So even though there's a lot of stuff in this game that never happens ever again in the series, yeah, I'm just going to go right through them, take the damage. You know, like the turtles that explode after you jump on them, like the rubber ball power up, so on and so forth. There is a lot of stuff here that just never happens again in the series. But then there is stuff that was introduced in this game, which does resurface in later games, such as Princess Daisy right here. I haven't really kept up with the more modern Mario games, but I know that she does reappear in whatever modern games people are playing. Yes. Um, there's all the Smash Brothers games and whatever. I mean, I know. Then there are the Mario Kart games. I think Daisy just you know makes cameos in these spin-off titles, but she definitely debuted in this game here. Super Mario Land. Just trying to run underneath that enemy right there. Was that a pipe I could go down? I don't even know. Ah. Oh man, I jumped off center on that turtle. Now, the setting of this world is very unique for Mario. It seems to be ancient Japan / ancient China. Um, and it's definitely the only time that Mario finds himself in this kind of setting, as far as I know. Um, very unique enemies as well. I've heard these guys referred to as vampire zombies, apparently. Um, but in the game, there's no label, of course. Um, so going by the content of the game alone, I would have just thought that those enemies were martial arts practitioners. That's what I would have interpreted them as. But people are saying that they're like vampire zombies, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that's about. Like, I'm not sure if that's some kind of traditional folklore type of thing, or if it's just, or if it's more of like a pop culture reference. I mean, because vampires and zombies have been around forever, so it could have just been that. Um, sort of like Halloween always had stuff like that. So, I mean, like the holiday of Halloween always had vampires and, well, zombies weren't as popular back then, but I mean, there have always been zombies as well. So maybe they were just throwing in, elements of pop culture. Or, like I said, maybe it's sort of a folklore character. I'm not really sure. Or maybe the enemies really were just created as martial arts people. Hey, look at that. But then the label of being vampire zombies might have just been like a weird translation thing, or a weird label sort of added, that wasn't really part of the original concept. That's possible too. Because it might have been added as a reason why the enemies don't die. Like, that might be why they're called vampire zombies, because they don't die and they just get up after you jump on them. So that's possible. But yeah, maybe they were just originally created as martial arts people. It is possible. It's so weird that they don't hit you. All right. here we are back in Mario 3, and that giant flower that you see down there, I think those are from Mario 3 as well. I believe those enemies are directly lifted from Mario 3. Oh man, look at this madness here. Like I said earlier, the coin rooms in this game are much crazier than in the main series. See, the controls were decent right there. Running and jumping, getting momentum. I'd say the controls are maybe 2/3 familiar. Like the basics are recognizable from NES, Mario 1. And sometimes it does feel good running and jumping around. So yeah, maybe it's like 2/3 consistent and familiar for the controls. But then, oh man, I should have waited. But then everything is just slightly quirky and unpredictable. You know, for maybe a third of your controls. Like the basics are there. The basics are recognizable and familiar, but then you just run into all the weirdness that you're not used to. Don't know if you can jump on that flower. I should definitely avoid it. Oh no! Yeah, those snakes are definitely a really weird enemy that I don't think comes from any of the Mario games. Unless maybe it's a reference to those snake enemies in Western Mario 2. That's possible. Because there are snakes in that one game. Oh my god. Oh, that's quite the little trap right there, isn't it? Alright, I'm taking my time here. Nice. Yeah, like, what are those snakes? Are they referring to Western Mario 2? I really don't know. Oh man, look at this. It's probably a really good power-up right there, too. Alright. Yes! Ah. Oh my god! I said how easy it was to walk off of platforms by mistake. The music is good, as weird as it is. It's got that kind of reference to traditional Asian music. Oh man, look at this. Yeah, this is definitely the only way to get through the game, for myself anyway, just collecting as many lives and power-ups as possible. Um, I did try rushing through the game a little bit, and it just doesn't work. Uh, if I'm rushing, I'll die more often from all the little quirks of the controls and quirks of everything. um, so then I mean, I'll die more if I'm rushing, and plus I won't be getting all the extra lives and coins if I'm rushing. So, oh no. So it doesn't work. Like, I was trying to rush through the first world, um, and get to the second world. I mean, not during this Let's Play, but other times I was playing, I was trying to do that because I love the music in World 2. So I was trying to rush through the first world and just so I could just so I could run World 2, and I wanted to actually like clean my apartment and stuff and listen to the music from World 2. Um, but yeah, rushing through the game just does not work at all. You know, for the extra deaths, like I said, the extra deaths that happen when you're rushing, but also the lack of getting all the extra lives to balance out all of the extra deaths in this game, which come from the controls and just general glitchiness and quirkiness of the gameplay in this game. But here we are. I'm at the very last stage of the game again, and got that great song remix from Mario One. Um, but yeah, hopefully, oh man, but yeah, hopefully after I get through this, we'll see some kind of level select appear. Apparently, I haven't seen it happen, so it'll be cool to see what it looks like. Although, having played through the second quest here just now, I am not convinced that there is a real second quest with more enemies. Like, I just did not notice it if there was more enemies. Oh my god. After all that. Alright, here we go. Those hands crack me up. So ridiculous. Alright. Not too difficult, like I said last time. You just have to move up and down, dodging the pattern of projectiles. No big deal. A little tricky, but nothing major. Actually, I'm just noticing this music here is based on the castle song from Mario 1. I just noticed that. Right? Isn't it? That was worth saying it to lose a life. Oh my god. I totally passed over that mushroom without getting it. Alright. I'm not really going to talk here because I'm just going to be focusing on the pattern. Ah, or not. I did see a hack of Super Mario Land that was just released very recently um, for Super Nintendo. So it basically recreates this game using all new assets, all new graphics, and just everything is new for the hack on Super Nintendo. Um, Recreating this game with 16-bit graphics, and not sure what the name of that hack was, but it looked really awesome. Um, Although it seemed to really lose the feel of this game, I thought. Um, I mean, it was a great hack, but giving it full color and more advanced sprites and everything, just there we go. Just gave the game a completely different feel altogether. But definitely a cool hack, and probably has more elements of the game reappearing there in that hack more than in the real series. Your quest is over. So I'm eagerly anticipating that level select because so far the second quest did not seem noticeably different from the first quest. And if that stage select happens, that'll be the first real noticeable difference. But great song here. Like I said, one of the best musical compilations for the Game Boy ever. It's a nice reward for playing through the game, too. It's a great song. Seems kind of sentimental, doesn't it? Like you're remembering, like it kind of has that feeling of remembering happy times in the past. The bittersweet memory of times that were happy and loving, but they're past. Doesn't it have that kind of feel to it? Memories that make you happy to remember them, but sad that they're in the past. Also, I'm not sure why the princess is new in this game, but I think that probably was just because the setting was new in this game. Um, the setting being Sarasa Land for this game. So that was a nice way for the developers to embrace all the differences and limitations in this game, um, as well as the different art style, like the line art in the backgrounds and different enemy sprites, etc. It was a nice way to explain all that by just having a new setting for everything. All right, so let's see that stage select. Oh, it is there. Cool. Look at that. 1-1. How do I change it? Oh, that's cool. Oh, and here's the demo. The demo gameplay still takes over. But yeah, there is a level select. Cool. All right, let's go listen to Penny Lane. All right, I'm gonna peace out, but um, what else can I say? This is a very unique game. I guess that would apparently validate the fact of it being a second quest with more enemies, even though it's really not noticeable.